pray. Through the written word and through the spoken word, may we behold the living word. Amen. Well, today is the 214th birthday of Charles Darwin. And so we celebrate Evolution Sunday, along with hundreds of other churches around the world, an observance now in its 17th year. Now, as you might imagine, Evolution Sunday began in the United States, where, in many ways, the battle being waged between science and religion, and specifically between evolution and the various forms of creationism, is more rancorous than it was over 160 years ago when Darwin published his book on the origin of species. Now, although some of those on the creationist side are incredibly vocal, from a religious perspective, they are clearly well out of the mainstream, and so they present a distorted image of Christianity. And so I think it's appropriate then for the majority view to be heard once in a while. And though I doubt evolution is an issue for any of you, Evolution Sunday is a good time to address the key issue which underlies the debate, namely, the image of God. Now, before I entered the ministry, I worked as a scientist and engineer, having earned my first degree in physics. So the relationship of science and religion holds a particular interest for me. This interest was excited by one of the very first books I ever read on theology. It was a thin book, but it was thick with ideas, entitled Nature and God. And its author was an Australian, a biologist and a process theologian. Well, I had borrowed it from the library, and I was so grabbed by it, I immediately tried to buy a copy, only to find out that it was no longer in print. Nevertheless, the author, L. Charles Birch, a former Challis professor of biology at the University of Sydney, has been what you might call a valuable traveling companion on my personal theological journey these past 45 years or so. Now, as a scientist and theologian, he did for me what I've tried to do for others throughout my ministry. He freed me from thinking that in order to be a Christian, I had to believe things that were, to my scientific mind, unbelievable. Now, the very first sentence in Birch's book, the very first sentence is, "The concept of God's operations in the universe as a series of fitful interventions from a supernatural sphere overlaying the natural is quite unacceptable to science." And the third sentence said, "On the other hand, the traditional thinking of science, sometimes called mechanism, is quite unreconcilable with any reasoned Christian position." Only bad science and bad theology conflict. Good science and good theology do not. Now, since reading Birch way back then, the relationship between science and religion has remained with me. On the relationship between science and religion, three views currently exist. There's the conflict view, namely that science and religion are inherently and perpetually in opposition. And there's a contrast view, that science and religion are different because they ask different questions. And then the integration view, that science and religion can be integrated into a self-consistent worldview. Now, unfortunately, what emanates from too many pulpits is more likely to represent the conflict view than the integration view, which is why on Evolution Sunday, I want to speak personally about God. God is a symbol or word known and used by nearly everyone who speaks the English language. But it is also a word which has many uses and meanings attached to it. In other words, it carries a lot of baggage. So much, in fact, the word is rendered almost meaningless for purposes of effective communication. Now, the late Professor Robert Anderson, one of the authors of The Basis of Union and the principal of the Theological Hall when I was a student, was of the opinion that the future of the church hinged on its image of God, or more specifically, its ability to convey a concept of God that is meaningful to a modern, educated society. The Macquarie Dictionary defines the word God as the one supreme being, the creator and ruler of the universe. Now, this way of speaking theologically is called classical theism. And this God is supernatural, interventionist, and nearly always couched in male anthropological, that is, human-like language and images. And this is the way many people, perhaps many of you, still think when they hear the word God. Now, if that works for you, that's fine. But this way of thinking doesn't work for me, nor does it work for many people today. Primitive cultures had a very limited understanding of how the world works. So for them, much of their existence was worryingly inexplicable. And so to have a supernatural being in charge of it all, particularly a benign one, well, it was comforting. Humans now understand how most things work in terms of natural law. And so for God to make sense to scientifically literate people, theology is advised not to contradict what we already know scientifically. And over the years, my thinking has and continues to change. And I have come to think of God as the creative process or creativity, rather than a being who creates. And I prefer in the main to use non-personal metaphors rather than personal ones. There was a fuss in the United Church of Canada a few years ago because one of its ministers declared she was an atheist. But she was just trying to make a point. Just as the prefix a in asymmetrical means non-symmetrical, and the a in amoral means non-moral, so the a in atheist simply means a non-theist. An atheist is not one who doesn't believe in God. Rather, simply a person who rejects the theist image of God. Now, in these terms, I too am an atheist, as are many of my colleagues in ministry, and I suspect a fair number of lay people, including, I know, some of you. The thoughts of many others have interacted with my own thinking, including those positively influenced by the work of Charles Darwin and his 1859 publication on the origin of species. In that book, Darwin suggested that the world/universe was unfinished and continuing. Secondly, involved in chance events and struggle. And finally, that natural selection took the place of design according to some preordained divine blueprint. Put in another way, in the beginning was creativity, and the creativity was with God, and the creativity was God. was God. And all things came into being through the mystery of creativity. And apart from creativity, nothing would have come into being. Now, today we have mentally constructed another universe, both in science and in religion. In science, the most widely accepted modern estimate of the Earth's age is approximately 4.5 billion years. And while the universe, that whole complex, interrelated and interacting matter, energy, and space-time, of which humans are an integral part, is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Now, it's hard to grasp such a large number, but to give you some perspective, imagine if our roughly 14 billion year universe was created in one day, starting at midnight. On this scale, the current model Homo sapiens would appear only in the last second and a half before the next midnight, 11:59.58.5. Modern science is saying, and has been saying again and again, the universe must be regarded as a whole. It is of intrinsic value. Each part, galaxy, organism, individual atom, participating in that intrinsic value as each part participates in this wonderful web of life. Okay, each part, rather than one species or organism separating itself out as more important than the rest, as we have tended to do. And as for the world of religion or theology, the naturalistic strand of theology, shaped by former Harvard Divinity School professor Gordon Kaufman, presents God as a non-personal, serendipitous creativity, manifest throughout the cosmos instead of as a kind of cosmic person. We humans are deeply embedded in and basically sustained by this creativity, acting in and through the web of life on planet Earth. A growing number of people around the world, religious and scientifically minded, and conscious of this web within a web of life, are recognizing that our modern lifestyle, which has been heavily influenced by a traditional Judeo-Christian faith, is 1, harming other creatures, 2, diminishing the function of the ecosystems, and 3, altering global climate patterns. The Earth is under assault by us. We are killing the very life support system that we need in a manner unprecedented in human history. And yet most of us go about our daily lives more or less blissfully indifferent to the devastation that we are causing. And unfortunately, their religion has been an unwitting accomplice in humanity's crime against the earth. We are the end product of almost 14 billion years of evolution, having arrived a mere second and a half at the end of creation's day. And yet we now have the power to shift the course of evolution. We find ourselves, for better or worse, co-creators with God. And so it is utterly crucial that we have an image of God that helps us to function in a positive way for the sake of the planet. Modern religious thought calls each and every one of us to live in harmony with, to dance with our world. A progressive Christianity names the creativity which indwells and sustains all life forms, whether it be galaxy, organism, or individual atom, G-O-D, or the sacred, or serendipitous creativity. And this creativity works within you and me. We bear the responsibility for its ongoing unfolding as we choose to work with it or against it. And don't minimize your role. The choice you make is at work far beyond your own personal horizons. You, as an individual, live for but a few decades. But you are also an intricate part of a culture that is millennia old, and your influence as part of this culture will continue long after you're gone. You are also part of a species that has an inordinate effect upon the planet and has for 250,000 years, and which could go on for millions of years more if we manage to avoid destroying ourselves. Finally, you and I and every living thing are part of the cosmos, literally made of the same stardust over the past 14 billion years, and you will be part of the universe forever. Nature is in us as much as we are in nature. We are webs of reality, woven out of the threads of culture, biology, and cosmos. And as webs of reality, each of us is a manifestation of a larger part of the universe as a whole. We contain in us, after many cosmic, biological, and cultural transformations, the radiation that was present at the origin of the universe. So just forget the artificial debate between science and religion. There is no conflict. The evolutionary epic is a religious worldview. And all of this and more is why on Evolution Sunday I wanted to talk about God. Amen.